All right, this is LeetCode 135 Candy. This is the daily problem for June 2nd, 2025. So we have n children in a line, and this is another like candy allocation problem. So in this case, we're given this ratings array, which represents a rating for each child. And what we want to do is we want to ensure that okay. So I mean, these are the constraints, right? Each child must have at least one candy, and then the more like critical part of this problem is the more important part of the problem is that if a child has a higher rating than one of their neighbors, they have to have more candies than that child. So it's not like we're not really looking at some global view of the ratings. It's not like the child with the highest ratings has to have most candy. It's just we're just looking at adjacent students. So really, I mean, the ratings is basically arbitrary, right? What only matters is whether there's an increase or decrease, right? Because we just want to make sure the children have more candies than their neighbors if their rating's higher. So I think the solution is kind of intuitive, maybe hard to get if on the spot if this is a hard problem, so maybe the solution is not super easy to come up with, but I think it definitely makes sense. So I mean, it can be solved greedily, right? Via two passes through the array, and so I mean, the first thing is, right, every child must get at least one candy, so we can initialize our result array to just be that, just a bunch of ones. And then essentially what we want to do is we want to just basically iterate through and say, okay, if we come across like an increase, so if the next child has a higher rating than the current child, then let's give the next child one more candy, right? Than whatever the current child has. So, we'll start at index 1, and then we'll say if the current rating is greater than the previous rating, then give that child one more candy than the previous child, right? So that's like a greedy approach. We're just iterating from left to right, but we can't end there, right? Because I guess it's helpful to show an example of this. So let's say, and my numbers here are going to be arbitrary because, like I said, it's just increases and decreases that matter. The numbers here don't actually matter. So let's say we had like ratings like 158, and then our result array was like this. We'd say, okay, here's an increase, so let's make this a 2. It's 1 more than the previous. Here's another increase, so we'll make this 3. And then that would be our result, right? This satisfies the conditions. But let's say we have a decrease, right? So let's say we have like 4 and then 2, right? So we'd have 2 more ones here, and then nothing would happen here on the first pass because these are decreases, so we don't do anything. So what we actually have to do is we have to make a second pass going right to left, and we have to say, okay, if we find an increase, what we're going to do is we want to increase. So like here, right, here's 2 to 4. That's an increase in the rating. This child has a higher rating, so we want to give them more candies than this child. So okay, let's increase that by 1, right? That's the naive way to do it. And then here's another increase. But do we want to increase this number by 1? No, we don't, because we want the minimum number of candies, right? So if we don't have to add another candy, we don't need to add another candy. This already satisfies the constraint. 8 is greater than 4. That rating is higher, so this already satisfies the constraint. We actually don't have to do anything. This would be our result. So when we make our second pass here, that's going to be the difference. So, we're going to start at len ratings -2 because we're starting, we're going to start right here. So that's len ratings -2. And then we're going to go to the beginning. And then we're going to say if ratings, so if the current rating is less than, or I should say, if the current rating is greater than the next rating, right, then we're going to set that index. And, you could do another conditional here to handle whether the value is already large enough, but I think, we could just say max. So if it's already large enough, we're just going to keep it. Otherwise, we're just going to make it, we're just going to increase 1, right? Just like we did up here. And then, we want to return, we don't want to return the array, we just want to return the number of candies. So we could just return sum res. And yeah, that works. And solution's pretty efficient. It's just 2 linear passes, so the time complexity is O of n, and O of n space for the result array. But yeah, I think this problem is pretty straightforward. Honestly, it felt more like a medium than a hard, but like I said, if you didn't recognize that this can be solved with the greedy approach, then maybe it's hard. But yeah.